In this episode, you'll hear some sensitive topics such as NDE, near-death experiences. So with this trigger warning, if you have little ones around, please grab your headphones now.
Everyone's experience is a little different, but my experience with my first cup ever trying this, I was sitting next to a houseplant and I heard this houseplant clear its throat. The houseplant went, I was hearing this in my mind. So I opened up my water bottle and poured it all over the houseplant. And then the thing started talking to me. He said, "Oh, thanks. My throat was dry." And then he just started talking to me and telling me the whole story of the forest and how he was an ambassador from the forest and how humans were basically the descendants of plants and we had unearthed our roots so that we could walk unbound on the earth and spread seeds. And we were in partnership with the plants. So I stayed in the death realm because it was a lot more interesting. So I realized I wasn't just like floating in outer space. I was like looking out of the window of a spaceship and I was in this amazing, like, when you see like Star Trek, the new Star Trek movies,
Uh-huh.
J.B.J. Abrams, it was like that, but cooler.
Okay.
So I'm like in this spaceship and I'm like, where am I? And I start walking around down the halls and when like a place is your place,
Mm-hmm.
like when you're walking around your house, you're like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, I'm in my
Mm-hmm.
house." Yeah, this is my ship. I was like, "Oh, this is my ship." Like I recognized everything. When I was satisfied with that question, I was like, "Okay, so I guess I can leave time because I'm not in my body either, and I'm able to leave all these illusions behind, right?" So then I don't know how this started, but it just started, right? Like in Star Wars when they have like the blue glowing transparent stuff happen and it's like a phone call or Yoda or somebody saying something. So I started seeing all my DNA, like this glowing blue stuff. So there was like the DNA helix in front of me
Mm-hmm.
in this infinite blackness. And then each little
Strand.
connector, yeah,
Yeah.
each little thing connecting the things opened to almost like a YouTube video. And then I could go into that YouTube video and it was a moment of my life. So I went through every moment of my life.
Folks, this week's guest is Rahul Panchal, a creative strategist and rebirth facilitator. Rahul has got an incredible story of transforming from his past life as an award winning creative director to living his new life spiritually awakened. And it all started from an invitation to an ayahuasca ceremony. You've got to tune in and hear Rahul's story. Let's cue the intro. Welcome to the Boom Vision Podcast, the show that empowers you to live an enriching life physically, mentally, and spiritually. I am your host, Benjamin Ye, and I created this podcast to give you perspectives on how to strengthen your mindset so that you can build optimal health, create aligned wealth, and connect with your higher self. It's all interconnected. Let's get to work. Welcome to episode 48 of the Boom Vision Podcast. I am stoked to share part 1 of today's interview with my new friend, Rahul Panchal. I connected with Rahul through our mutual friend, Tian Mu, my guest in episode 36. Tian invited me to join this breathwork workshop that Rahul was hosting a few months back. And after experiencing an amazing session, I knew I had to invite Rahul to Boom Vision. As a brief background, Rahul has been oil painting since age 7 and started working as a designer at an ad agency at age 22. He's helped design and art direct award-winning work for Coca-Cola, Mini Cooper, Burger King, and more. He was creative director for Super Bowl campaigns for major brands including Honda and Pepsi, and has been recognized nationally and internationally for his work, winning almost every major advertising award. At age 33, he ventured off to the Himalayas to deepen his spiritual understanding of Eastern culture and learn from yogis and sadhus, and was guided to facilitate breathwork journeys. A year later, he lived with a medicine tribe in the Amazon to deepen his understanding and practice with indigenous plant medicines. He's led hundreds of breathwork healing ceremonies for thousands of people in New York and Los Angeles. These days, he leads creative strategy for his clients. On Sundays, he holds a community breathwork circle on Zoom for anyone who wants to let it all go and to start the week fresh. So without further ado, here's Rahul. Rahul Panchal, welcome to the Boom Vision podcast. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
It's so great to have you here. I'm grateful that Tien connected us, and I want to just dive right in, Rahul. Let's start with your origin story. Where did it all start for you? What's happened in the past 10, 20 years, and what's led to what you are doing today?
Okay. That's a big question. I'm trying to think where to start. But today, every weekend, I do a rebirth healing session where people come and lay on a mat and we listen to some nice music and we do some very easy breathing. I wouldn't even call it breath work. It's just a big inhale and a big exhale nonstop for an hour. And through this gentle and relaxing process, an amazing healing process happens. Angels are invited in, higher selves are invited in, and people go through a very miraculous healing process. I 10, 20 years ago, I would have never imagined this is what I would be doing on my weekends. My prior lifetime before this one, I was an executive in advertising, running digital marketing for Pepsi. Before that, I was running creative for a tech startup. And before that, I was working at an agency doing commercials for Nike and ESPN and Mini Cooper and stuff like that. So I was very much in like a advertising space. And, I'm Indian, right? So yeah, meditation and yoga were always on the table, as things to do. And as a kid, like I always knew that I had done those things in other lifetimes. And I felt like I had done enough of that stuff in those lifetimes to where I didn't need to do it in this lifetime. So, the things I was trying to figure out in this lifetime were how to, like, really, I was obsessed with advertising when I was younger and making commercials and stuff like that. But in 2015, I had a very interesting experience where I had the incredible gift of leaving my body. And, I don't really know how else to describe it other than to say I died. And when I came back into my body after a few hours, I had to, the process coming back took a few years because, my brain and everything had gone offline for a while. I had to remember how to drive. I had to remember how to do all kinds of basic stuff.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So tell me, I'd love to understand more. So when you're saying you left your body, like, was it during your sleep or what happened?
Yeah, let's go. Let's like really, really get into it.
Yeah.
So 2 years before I died, I started having incredible health problems. Like out of nowhere, I gained a bunch of weight. I had a whole bunch of brain fog, and I knew something was wrong. So I went to a doctor, or I went to my doctor, and I said, "Hey, doc, I need to get all the blood work. I need to figure out why I'm gaining weight, why I feel like there's like cotton balls in my brain, and why I just feel terrible." So the blood work came back and my thyroid was off. My pancreas was turning off. So I was going to be fully diabetic in like less than a year. I got prescribed like thyroid medicine, some pre-diabetic stuff. I don't remember how much stuff, but it was like 10 different, when you go to the doctor and they give you a prescription, it's like one little sheet of paper.
Yeah.
I got a whole stack. I had like 10 prescriptions. And so I said, "Thanks, doc. Like, I'll go check out these prescriptions." And I said, "So how long do I take these pills for before I'm better? Like, is it like a 6-month thing and then I'm better?" And she's like, no. She's like, "These are all chronic, lifelong issues." She's like, "You're going to start taking these pills now, then we're going to test your blood again next year and you're going to get more pills. And you're going to have to start injecting whatever that stuff is that diabetic people have to inject."
What?
Yeah.
Insulin? Is it insulin?
Insulin. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that just didn't sit right with me because I was like in my early 30s. It just felt a little bit, like I was too young for that,
Yeah.
So I said, hey, I want to try something more holistic. And she told me she wasn't.
You said the H word.
Yeah, she wasn't comfortable with that. So I got a new doctor. So I interviewed a few new doctors, and I told them, hey, I want to try something non-prescriptive, like something that would actually heal me, not just bury my symptoms with pills. And so I found this one great doctor. At the time, I was living in New Jersey, and he was like top rated doctor in New Jersey. So I went to him and I said, hey, I want to get blood work every 6 months. And I was also talking to a buddy of mine at the time. He's like a healer, but with food. Like he's helped people shed cancer with food. He used to do he used to be like the at-home cook for Giselle and Tom Brady.
Mm.
I mean, this guy's like a Jedi when it comes to food.
Yeah.
So I called him and I was like, dude, I've got all these health issues and I don't want to take these pills. I want to actually heal. What would you do? And he says, well, why don't you read this book, 80-10-10 by Dr. Douglas Graham? And it's basically a how-to manual on how to live on nothing but fruit. And not just live, but thrive and heal. And,
Mm.
it's an amazing book.
Mm.
In one of the early chapters, it talks about how there's this relationship with life, right? So most foods, to eat them, you have to kill something, right? Like if you want to eat a steak, you have to kill a cow. If you want to eat a broccoli, you have to kill the broccoli plant. If you want to eat a lettuce, you have to kill the lettuce thing. But to eat fruit, nothing dies, right? If you want to eat a mango, the mango tree is literally like, if you ever look at a mango tree, it looks like the tree is handing you the fruit.
Mm.
Like it's being offered to you, and it fits perfectly in your hand, and it fits perfectly in your mouth, and nutritionally and energetically it fits perfectly into your cells. And there's no taking, there's no death with
Mm.
fruit, because every piece of fruit, from a mango to a banana to a cucumber to a tomato, anything with seeds in it, starts off as a flower. And a flower is essentially the plant's vagina. And so the plant is just living its life, expressing itself sexually. It opens up its vagina to the world. And then the birds and the bees come and move the pollen around, right? And move the genetic material around. And the fruits happen. And to help the plants complete their sexual reproduction process, you got to eat the fruit and spit the seeds out somewhere, right? So plants make these delicious fruits for us so that we want to eat them and carry them around and like them. And then we put them back in the dirt, and then, more of that plant happens. So it's this very reciprocal process where we're fully involved in the lovemaking process of these plants. So anyway, I read that in the book and I was sold. I was like, wow, this is amazing. And also the book talks about how fruit is alive and electric. And so the electricity and the living energy that's in the fruit is very healing.
Mm.
So I started eating the fruit. I shifted away from eating dairy and meat and cooked foods. And the first 2 weeks of doing this, tremendous amounts of mucus were coming out of my nose.
Mm.
Like almost every time I'd blow my nose, an ounce of mucus would come out, which is a lot.
Yeah.
A lot. And it went on like that for about 2 weeks. And then I got a rash on my legs that was happening because of my system being overloaded from all of the junk. I ate a lot of junk food as a kid. I grew up in Texas. I was not breastfed. I was fed formula. So all of the chemical debris from the formula and all the chemical debris from the TV dinners and Burger King that I ate as a kid was all packed into my cells. So inside your cells, the inner cell wall can hold a plaque. And when you eat only fruit, the sweet, delicious fiber that's in fruit washes out the cells and scrubs the cells with this very gentle fiber, right? It's not like celery fiber. Celery fiber is like big and heavy.
Mm-hmm.
You know how people say, oh, there's so much sugar in fruit? That's not true. Sugar is a white crystal. There's no white crystals in fruit. There's really delicate water soluble fibers in fruit that if you heat them and cook them and boil them down, yeah, you could crystallize them and make sugar. But to your body, it's a very cleansing thing.
Mm.
So I was eating a lot of fruit And I'm feeling, you start to get to where, I mean, at least for me, I started getting to the point where I could feel the fruit. I would just eat like I don't know, like a whole watermelon. And then I would just lay down and I could feel the sunshine like shining on the leaves of the watermelon plant and the watermelon soaking up the sunshine and creating itself from the water. Like I developed this kind of like psychic connection with the fruits.
Wow.
But also like when you eat fruit, because you're not eating so many dead animal bits, in the meat is just a little bit of the hormones of the animal, right? Like the cortisol and the fear and all that kind of stuff. So as all that stuff starts to leave your body, you start to become very sensitive. Or at least I did. I don't know if this is true for everyone, but for me, I became very sensitive to food. And years later, when I started getting back into eating animal foods and cooked foods again, the first time I ate a fish, I cried for the whole next day, and every time I closed my eyes, I could see the fish being pulled from the water and killed, and it not wanting to go that way. And
Wow.
but yeah, it was intense. I mean, my buddy had just gone fishing, off the coast of Malibu, caught this beautiful tuna, and I'm really good at cooking fish, so I was like, I'll sear it up for you, and there's a lot of it, so we all just had a whole bunch of tuna, and I hadn't had it in a while, so it was a new thing.
So you went through this fruit diet and your body went through this purging and also this like recalibration of, it's like a new set point of what's considered clean or not clean for you, right? And in this process, because, initially you were saying you were having these health complications come up, and it sort of snowballed into this place in your life where you're like, wait, if I stay status quo, this is not going to work, right? And and then so you got introduced to this book, you got introduced to this fruit diet. And then after the 2 weeks, after you've gone through the phase where there's like so much mucus, right? Once you went over that hump, like then what happened?
So, well, so the first there was the mucus hump, then there was the rash hump. So I had to take warm showers and then put coconut oil all over my skin, and then the coconut oil would draw out like these like toxins in my skin. And so I would basically like put coconut oil over myself, then scrape it off, then put new coconut oil on. And I would have to do that like a few times a day just to get all the stuff out of my skin that was just coming out of me.
Hmm.
And I was ready to stop at that point. So I called my buddy and I was like, yo, this is what is going on. There's mucus everywhere. I'm rashing up. Like, you said this fruit thing was going to help. And he's like, hey, man, you're going through a healing crisis. You just got to ride the wave and get through it. So I stuck with it. And about 2 months into this, every symptom that I had was gone. And I felt super clear, super crispy, super fit. But I stuck with it. And I got to where I went from being completely lethargic, like not even able to get out of bed without like a thyroid vitamin made out of like desiccated animal organs, to like literally hopping out of bed at sunrise and going for like 20-mile bike rides.
What?
Yeah, I became like super Energizer Bunny because I had all this electricity from living fruits like zip zapping through my body.
Oh.
So the results were so profound and positive that I didn't want to stop, even though looking back, I probably could have. I just became very active, and I had about another year and a half of that. And then about 2 years into this fruit experiment, that same friend, he said, we had started a juice cafe, to help more people eat like this.
Mm-hmm.
Except I was living in New York and the cafe was down in Florida and whatever. So he said, hey, look, we're going to have a meeting with some potential investors. Do you want to come down for the meeting? We're going to open up another location in Miami and yada, yada. So I said, sure. Yeah, I'd love to come down. I'll come down for the weekend, and then I'll get back to work on Monday. No big deal. And he's like, great. And he's like, when you come, bring a white outfit, an all white outfit, because we're going to go to a plant medicine ceremony. And I said, hey, I love fruit. I love plants. Whatever you think is a good idea, I'm down. Right. Because I used to fight him on everything. I used to, because he says a lot of like kind of stuff that's outside the box. So I didn't even think twice when he said plant medicine ceremony. I just thought it was some kind of fruit thing or something. I don't know. I was just like, whatever, man.
Yeah.
I trust you. Everything you say eventually is for the best, even if it makes me all itchy and mucusy for a few weeks. So, so he's like, okay, cool. I'll let the shaman know that you're going to come to the ceremony. She's going to call you and have whatever, but she knows you're eating only fruit. So most of that's okay. So at the time, I'm basically like running Pepsi's digital efforts for the Super Bowl. And we got all this stuff going on with Katy Perry and da da da. So I'm really busy at work. And I have this call with the shaman while I'm at work. And literally, I muted the phone and I was still working with other stuff and barely listening to anything she said. And then at the end, she was like, do you have any questions? I said, no, that all makes sense. And she's like, okay, I'm going to send you a link. Just read it. And, we'll see you there. And she's like, I'm glad you're eating the fruit stuff. That's a good diet for what we're going to do. And I'm like, yeah. Okay, cool. See you there. Click, right? So she sends me this super long article about ayahuasca. And I'm like, what is ayahuasca? I've never even heard of this thing. And I don't have time to read a really long article about anything unless it has to do with Pepsi's Super Bowl efforts. So I scroll all the way to the bottom of this like 10-page thing. And at the bottom, it just says, when in doubt, just go with the flow and everything will be okay. So I say, great, that's my intention. I'll just go with the flow. I'll wear my white outfit, go with the flow, and not worry about it. So, a week or whatever goes by, I fly down to Miami. We have the investor meeting. It's great. It gives us the money to open another location. And then that night we go to the Continuum building. The Continuum building is like the nicest building in Miami, South Point. It's like the furthest south building on the tip. It's like the cutting edge to the ocean. So like we like the lobby is incredible. I mean, the place is like $100 million building or something like that. It's just insane building.
Yeah.
We go up this like super nice elevator. The elevator door opens right into this super nice apartment. The walls are like made out of crystals. Like, how like it's like it looks like a wall made out of marble, but it's like crystal,
Wow.
and like just amazing art everywhere. And like it's just like, where am I? And then the whole south wall is like 360, not 360, but like what 180
Panorama view. Yeah.
Panorama view of like open ocean. It's just so nice.
Yeah.
And I look around the room and there's little mats on the ground, tons of little mats like lined up. And then there's like a little bucket with a little plastic bag in it. And I'm just like, why are there all these little buckets next to these little mats? And like my first like thought, the first words in my mind were, is this a suicide cult? And then I was thinking, this is like I literally thought like, this is a good place to die. It seemed like safe and clean and like set up for it.
Wow.
And keep in mind, in these kind of ceremonies, nobody dies. This is not a normal thing, like you don't go to an ayahuasca ceremony to die. You might have like the experience of like an ego death, or, you're able to see into past lives and things like that. But it's not like people just like physically die. So the ceremony starts and, we drink the first cup of this medicine. It's just a tea. It's a tea made from two plants. There's one is the ayahuasca vine. It's like a vine. It's like almost like a long stick. And then they pull it out of the tree and they beat it with a mallet, and they break it up into like fibrous, almost like cinnamon, like you break it up and it becomes like pieces of wood.
Yeah.
And they boil that. And then they get leaves, just basic leaves from a certain plant, the chacruna plant. And they boil that all together until it becomes this really thick tea, like, just like a Chinese medicine tea. It looks like brown and thick. So it's just like a healing tea, Chinese medicine style. And so you drink a little cup of this stuff. And, I think everyone's experience is a little different, but my experience with my first cup ever trying this, I was sitting next to a houseplant and I heard this houseplant clear its throat. The houseplant went, I was hearing this in my mind. So I opened up my water bottle and poured it all over the houseplant. And then the thing started talking to me. He said, "Oh, thanks. My throat was dry." And then he just started talking to me and telling me the whole story of the forest and how he was an ambassador from the forest and how humans were basically the descendants of plants and we had unearthed our roots so that we could walk unbound on the earth and spread seeds. And we were in partnership with the plants. So that was cool. And also, I'm eating only fruit, right? So this was a very
Wow.
magical conversation for me at the time. So he went on and on for about an hour. I mean, he was explaining all kinds of stuff, like how like the most of our DNA comes from banana trees and just all kinds of weird stuff. Like our relationships to worms. Like banana trees are basically the plant versions of worms. It's like the way they eat stuff, and worms have a mouth hole and a butthole, and we have a mouth hole and a butthole. Like he was explaining all this weird stuff to me that made so much sense at the time. And
And this is a house plant, like you're having this conversation. Like, are you speaking verbally or like through your mind you're speaking?
no, all through the mind.
All through the mind. Okay.
But around me, like some people are throwing up, some people are crying, some people are whatever. I'm just sitting there, like having a full on back and forth with the houseplant. Then it came time for the second cup, right? So about 2 hours later, hour and a half later, they invite everyone up for the second cup. So I have another cup, and then I start thinking about how I use gasoline and fossil fuels and stuff like that. And I start crying because I'm really sad that I'm harming the planet using this stuff. And then like I'm literally like weeping into a pillow laying down, and I literally feel this like spirit of Mother Earth hold me and like pet my hair and say, "Hey baby, it's all okay. I love it when you humans get the oil out of my skin." She's like, "This issue is not your responsibility. There's other people on the planet that, have come to the earth to work on these things. You're not here for that, you know? So don't worry about it. Let other people handle that stuff." And it was like everything I had ever been emotionally tied up about, she, this Mother Earth spirit, just kind of like soothed my soul on all this stuff. And I was just like crying for like 2 hours straight about all kinds of stuff. I don't even remember what all the stuff was anymore. But after about 2 hours, the call came around for the third cup of medicine. And I was deep in the tear zone. So I was like, I don't want to come. And then the lady's like, come on, it's time. So I get up, I have the third cup, get back to my spot, and I'm sitting in meditation. And I'm just like seeing my DNA and the parts of me that are evolved from coral, like our bones, how our bones evolved from coral, how our intestines and like jelly like sections evolve from jellyfish. And as I start tuning into that, those like jelly like mucosal cells in the body, I feel them start to wring out, and I feel them start to like I start feeling my intestine like
Expanding, contracting.
yeah. And I'm like, ooh, I should probably go to the bathroom now. This is a good time to, sit on a toilet. And so I get up, and getting up was a bit of a surprise because I kind of fell over once I got up. So I got up, I stood up, and I go, whoa, you know. And keep in mind, this is like a very silent moment in the ceremony. Like everyone's in deep, deep prayer and meditation. They had just done like a whole prayer and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so I start working my way to the bathroom, and I don't know exactly what happened, but I didn't totally make it. And this girl caught me, and I'm kind of like looking up at the ceiling, but her face is right there in front of me, like she's holding me. And she's like, she literally says, "Surrender, I've got you. You can let go." And I'm like, really? Okay. And the next thing you know, I'm floating above Earth, looking at the planet, and I'm just like, wow, am I dead? I'm like, I don't really feel my body. And then I'm like, I wonder what my body's doing. And so I like, how when we blink here, it just goes black for a second.
Right.
So it wasn't a blink, but I did that similar kind of reflex, and I was back in my body for just a split second. And I was definitely projectile vomiting everywhere and definitely diarrheaing all over myself. And then I was back floating above Earth, and I was like, whoa. Um, so I stayed in the death realm because it was a lot more interesting. So I realized I wasn't just like floating in outer space. I was like looking out of the window of a spaceship, and I was in this amazing, like, when you see like Star Trek, the new Star Trek movies,
Uh-huh.
JJ Abrams. It was
Uh-huh.
like that, but cooler.
Okay.
So I'm like in this spaceship, and I'm like, what? Where am I? And I start walking around down the halls, and when like a place is your place,
Mm-hmm.
like when you're walking around your house, you're like, oh, I'm
Mm-hmm.
in my
Mm-hmm.
house. Yeah, this was my ship. I was like, oh, this is my ship. Like I recognized everything. And everybody that was in the room with me in the ayahuasca ceremony, there was a room where they were all like in pods, like plugged in, like doing that whole thing.
Hmm.
Like they were all part of the crew of the ship. So I was like, okay. I, I don't remember how this happened, but this is definitely part of the program.
Hmm.
And that part of it was kind of like phasing in and out, and then I started asking like questions, right? I was like, okay, so if I'm not in my body, like if I can leave my body, can I leave time? So I started like, I don't know how to put it. It's like I was in the ship but not in the ship. Like I just started becoming pure consciousness and observing the universe and
Hmm.
watching like galaxies burn out and watching like stars like supernova and watching like just watching the universe end.
Yeah.
But I watched like I just sat there and watched like trillions of years happen, and I was like, when I was satisfied with that question, I was like, okay, so I guess I can leave time because I'm not in my body either, and I'm able to leave all these illusions behind, right? So then I don't know how this started, but it just started, right? Like in Star Wars when they have like the blue glowing transparent stuff happen and it's like a phone call or Yoda or somebody saying something. So I started seeing all my DNA like this glowing blue stuff. So there was like the DNA helix in front of me
Mm-hmm.
in this infinite blackness. And then each little
Strand.
connector, yeah, each
Yeah.
little thing connecting the things opened to almost like a YouTube video. And then I could go into that YouTube video and it was a moment of my life. So I went through every moment of my life. Like I was remembering everything, like the time I was 7 years old and tripped a kid
Yeah.
and being like, oh, not going to do that again. That was a bad decision. Or like remembering in college breaking up with my first girlfriend and like she cried and I was like, let me figure out how to do that a better way, or I went through every life decision. And then I started getting into my parents and like seeing how their lives had affected my DNA. And then I started getting into my grandparents and how their lives affected my DNA and like the way I carry myself and certain little things. And then I got to the layer of my great grandparents, and there was a problem. I started hearing arguments and feeling the drama, and I didn't know what it was, but I knew I needed to look at that. But there was like a problem there,
Hmm.
like a like almost like a red glowing area. Like everything
Yeah.
was blue, and then this part
Yeah.
was like glowing red.
Error. It's
Yeah,
like it's a red blinking thing on a dashboard.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was just error. And so then I kept going through the DNA through like animal lifetimes, through plant lifetimes, through the banana lifetimes, through the worm lifetimes, all the way down to the first single-celled organism bubbling out of clay, like just hot clay, volcanic clay bubbling and somehow forming something. And I was just like, oh my God, we're all from this one cell. And I mean, I'm really shortening down how long this process took.
It almost I'm getting a body chills because it feels like as if I mean it's like straight out of a scene from Interstellar where you're in that tesseract and it's like have you seen that movie before?
I found
Interstellar?
it. I didn't watch the whole thing. I found it really boring.
Because you're like I've seen this already. Right? But anyways, no, but what you're describing it sounds like time was almost controlled by your speed of thought. It's just if you wanted to, so you were literally seeing history within a flash because that's kind of where your mind was taking you at the time.
No, no, it was a very long time. Like
Mm,
I'm telling the story very quickly, but like I literally contemplated every moment of my life.
Oh, wow.
Like I sat in
Yeah.
contemplation, in meditation with every moment of my life.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying it took longer than my whole life, but it felt like it did.
Yeah.
Like it's not like I contemplated like I didn't contemplate like, you know, like not like neutral things, but
Mm.
things where there wasn't a neutral thing or where I felt a little something.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of contemplation and a lot of sitting with things and sitting with things that my parents had been through. Like I never really took the time to appreciate how young my mother was when her parents died, but I felt her
Mm.
sadness. And like I never understood the pain my dad was carrying because he lost his, I never even noticed it.
Yeah.
So anyway, all that stuff happens, and I'm just floating in the void, right? Like the nothing. And I'm just pure consciousness in the void. And like I'm kind of like zipping into like awarenesses, like knowledge of all things, back to nothing, knowledge of all things, back to nothing, just going back and forth. And then there came this moment where I just saw both of my daughter's little baby faces start to glow in front of me.
But this is before you had your daughters, or you already had your daughters?
My older one was about 5, and my younger one was about 3.
Got it. Okay. So you're not seeing a vision of the future where your kids weren't born yet. Like your kids were born, but then
Yeah,
you're
they were
seeing, got
they
it.
were
Okay.
alive. So
Okay.
I see that
Gotcha.
same like Star Wars like blue glowing
Yeah.
illuminated light kind of thing, and I see both of their cute little chubby faces, and it was kind of like, do you want to let them go or do you want to go back to Earth? So I was like, hell yeah, let's get back into the Earth situation. So I just tuned into my body, except I didn't have a body at this point, right? But I tuned into this container that I was in at some point. And just from where I was at, this question felt like a trillion years. Yeah, like I had almost forgotten that I had ever been on Earth or had a body. You know what I mean? Like it was so far away
Mm.
from the now moment.
Yeah.
I was so out, man, like so far out. Like before all the DNA stuff started, I literally watched all the stars burn out. I watched Earth get swallowed by the sun in flames. Like stuff was done. So I see my kids' faces and I'm like, okay, what's going on with my body? So I tune into my body and it is cold and like just cold. So I don't know how I knew how to do this, but I just like created a sun and pushed it into the core of my body and then
Mm.
relit all the like naughty lines or meridian lines and reheated the thing. And I mean, the next thing you know, I'm in it. I'm in the body and I open my eyes just a little bit and there's a pink blanket over my whole body and someone is like holding me, like spooning me, and I have like body fluids all over me. And I'm like, wow, this is like the most poetic rebirth ever. Because like there's literally a woman spooning me.
Yeah.
I'm literally bathed in pink light and I'm just covered in my own body juices.
Right.
Like it's literally what a baby experiences.
Right.
And I just sit there in the bliss and the perfection of it for like 5-10 minutes. And like a couple songs go by and I'm just like, wow, this is so amazing. And then I hear some people saying some stuff like, man, he's really been down there like that for a while. I'm starting to get worried. So I heard that and I said, hey, don't worry, I'm back. I'm just incubating or something. I said something like some kind of
Yeah.
gestating. I just said something like that. I was like, oh, I'm gestating. Give me a minute. And then I don't know, like 15 minutes later, this guy in scrubs came up to me and he's like, hey, do I need to bathe you or are you able to bathe yourself? And I said, I think I can do it. And so I literally had to remember how to stand up, which took a minute, like I just had to like remember.
Yeah.
But like I had in my consciousness, I hadn't stood up in like a trillion years. I hadn't even had legs in like a trillion years. It was like so far
Mm.
gone.
What?
So I stood up, and that was pretty cool. Like, big accomplishment. And like literally when I got on 2 feet, I was just like, wow. Then they pointed me to the shower, and I literally had no idea how to turn this thing on. I stare, I like, I did my best. I touched it, I moved things, I couldn't get it to do anything.
Hmm.
And I said, hey, can someone help me with the shower? I literally can't figure it out. And so someone turned the shower on for me. And then the girl that had caught me, she was assigned the duty of sitting in the bathroom on a chair while I was in the shower, just to, attend in case something happened or whatever.
Hmm.
I was so embarrassed about that, but like, not really, but kind of. But then, so I'm in the shower, and there's just all these bottles, like tons of bottles, right? Like shampoo, all this stuff. And I didn't know what to do with any of this stuff. So I just squirted a big blob of something on my chest and like rubbed it in, like just on, I literally just rubbed my chest and maybe my arms and my hands. And then just like what, the rest of my body, I got wet. And then I got out of the shower and wrapped the towel around my body, and the towel stuck to my body because I was completely covered in diarrhea, but not like poop diarrhea, like black, like soul tar, like weird stuff that only comes out when you go through what I just went through.
Wow.
Like, keep in mind, I'd also been eating only fruit for 2 years. So I was
Yeah.
squeaky clean on so many levels. And the stuff that was coming out of me was like tar and like moon
Yeah.
dust and like metal flakes. Like the weirdest stuff was coming out of me.
What in the world?
So I just where I was at mentally, I've forgotten that you have to like kind of put soap in your butt crack and scrub it out after you go through something like that. Like I literally forgot how to shower. I was like a baby, dude. I
Yeah.
was like brand new.
Yeah.
So I said, hey, I'm so sorry. I forgot how to shower. This towel's ruined. I'm gonna get back in the shower. And the girl was like, okay, you need to put soap. Like she starts walking me through it. I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, okay. So I take another shower. My second shower was much more successful. However, I didn't recognize this at the time, but I had just peeled off my clothes, and my wallet was in my pants, and I just left all that in the shower. The next day, I realized I had lost my wallet in the shower, and then the owner of the place had to go like dumpster diving to find my wallet in my diarrhea pants.
Wow.
Yeah, it was gnarly. It was gnarly, but these people just took such good care of me, and I don't know why. Like I remember at the very beginning of this thing, my higher self, I just had this knowing that this was a good place to go
Yeah.
through this death thing that needed to happen.
Yeah.
So it,
So let me ask you this. After going through what almost sounds like eternity, because I guess when you're in a different realm, time it doesn't go in the same pace as present
no,
moment, right? And so
yeah,
after going through what you went through, you had to go through this recalibration of relearning almost what it means to be a human being here. Like, what was that first? Were you done with the Super Bowl commercial, right, for Pepsi? Like, you had to go right back to work the next day. Like, what was your life like in the following week, month of just from that experience?
that is a great question. Well, like I said, the first day out of the ceremony, I realized I didn't have a wallet. So figuring out how to get that back was like an enormous life challenge. Then a real miracle happened. My flight home got canceled. So I emailed my boss and a couple other people that my flight had gotten canceled, and the next flight I could get out was on Thursday. I was supposed to fly back on Monday, but I got bumped to Thursday because there was some weather storm. That really like saved me in many ways because I was really raw, and I don't think I could have been around my wife or work on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. Being
Mm,
back on Thursday was already insane. Like my first day back, I had to go do a photo shoot with a hand model because Katy Perry refused to be seen holding a Pepsi. And I'm thinking like, yeah, that makes sense because you don't want to be seen holding this thing that just makes kids like obese and diabetic, and it's not good stuff. And we had to hire this hand model. So I'm directing a shoot with the hand model, just talking to her nonstop about my experience, and then like literally having to like go down 30 flights, go down this elevator, go to the alley behind this like skyscraper building and puke because I'm like, I can't believe what I'm doing for work. I'm like literally like, what? I'm like literally lying on behalf of a $1 billion company because their main talent doesn't want to be seen holding the drink. So we're getting someone else with the same skin color tone skin to like hold the drink. Like
Oh,
it's just,
wow. So you really had a hard reset on everything,
yeah, yeah.
right? Physically, mentally, like the whole works.
Yeah. I mean, before that experience, I was stoked for this. I picked out the hand model. I was like, her hands are great. Like 3 weeks before.
Yeah. And then you go back into this, wait, this is my reality? And it's like, this is what I'm doing? And it seems like what brought you perceived joy before just didn't connect in the same way, is what it
Yeah.
sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah. And my wife at the time, I mean, it wasn't just work, it was my wife, it was everything. It was everything. It was also the
Wow.
city I lived in. So
Okay.
shortly after coming back, I moved from LA, I mean from New York to LA. I
So when you're
I
saying everything, you mean like, okay, you're saying wife, family. Walk me through the thought process. Is it because what you thought you wanted in life shifted, or is it like what was it that, because this is very different from just, you know what I mean, reprioritizing, your purpose in life, but this is more than a fundamental shift, it sounds like.
yeah, I mean, keep in mind when I came back, I was a baby. Like I was more emotional than rational.
Mm,
When I went into this experience, I was more rational than emotional.
mm,
So going into this experience, I was coming with an adult mind. When I came out of the experience, I was a emotional baby. Like literally, I had to remember how to drive. Like when someone first handed me that car keys, I literally had no idea what to do with them. I sat in the driver's seat for about 5 minutes just contemplating what to do and trying to remember. So, the first conversation I had in person with my wife, she basically just yelled at me and I told her she was mean and that I didn't like her anymore. Like it was like the most childish conversation. And then she started taking me to a medium that helps people speak to like dead relatives and ancestors and stuff like
mm,
that,
mm,
which was really cool. So my wife said, "Hey, I found this lady that helps people talk to dead people. So I want to go because I want to try to get you back." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that's cool." So we go to this thing and it's like it looks like a really elegant kind of tea parlor, but there's like all kinds of like affirmations on the wall
yeah,
and it's in
yeah,
crystals and stuff
yeah,
everywhere. It's
yeah.
this interesting place in Montclair, New Jersey. It's still there. And so, this group meets at like 7 p.m. and it's all like 50 plus New Jersey housewives and widows and me and my gorgeous young wife. Like we just don't make sense there. And so the facilitator, she calls on the first person and she's like, yeah, uh, I'm talking to your dead dad now and I'm channeling the angels and he wants you to know that he loves you and this kind of stuff, like very gentle, peaceful
Yeah,
messages.
right.
So they go one by one through all these people with their questions. And I mean, the whole time I'm just like, what is this bullshit? Like, why did this woman bring me here? Like, what the and then she calls on my wife and does my wife. And she starts talking about the like multi-lifetime, like soul cosmic odyssey that she and I have had. And I'm just like, yeah, this is awesome. I'm into it now. Like they get it. Because like I knew my life from my wife from hundreds of lifetimes.
Mm,
And I knew it and I remembered it. Like the first time I saw my wife, I like blacked out and saw like hundreds of visions of her like holding my children in different lives.
oh,
And
wow.
then I came back into my body like after like 1 second,
Yeah.
and I was just dripping sweat. I was on the street in Manhattan and I'm looking at her in the window and I'd never talked to her or seen her or anything. And so I went into the shop and, you know, we had kids not too shortly after. But um
Wow.
I'm not saying that's the way you should be dating, but if I could do it again, I don't think I would do it that way. definitely take your time to get to know the person first. But yeah, anyway, so she and I had this very cosmic connection. Yeah, then the lady calls on me and she says, okay, so I got a couple more angels joining that want to talk through me to you. So she's like, I got Seth here, I got Yeshua, and she named some other angels, but it was mainly Seth and Yeshua. And every other person that she spoke to was very slow and calm. This situation was like fire. She was just going so fast and saying so much stuff. And then she would stop and catch her breath and look at me all shocked and say, do you know what I'm saying? Because I don't. And I just said, yeah, and just let her keep going. I don't remember everything she said, and I still even haven't processed everything she said, but most of what she said I took notes on and bought like, like 20 books to
Mhm.
like even begin to understand what she was talking about. She talked about how I had been on this planet called Maldek, which was that's a whole other story. Anyway, she just told me a whole bunch of cool stuff that I researched and got into, and it took me about 4 years to like research all the stuff she said.
So from that session, did it give you clarity? Because I think it sounded like your wife brought you to that medium with a different intention, right? The intention
Yeah,
really just I want my old husband back, right?
yeah,
But
yeah,
then
yeah.
but then going through the session, like what happened? Like did you feel you got clarity and remembering who your older self was, or realizing like, oh, I've already evolved past that older self? Like what.
Yeah, I got clarity on who I was from like an eternal self,
Mm,
which from an eternal standpoint, I could care less where I was at the point where I'd gotten married.
mm,
Because that was a lot of those things I was doing, like ad executive stuff and whatever, that wasn't part of my path coming here. That was like something I kind of
it's like a side hustle. Right.
it was like an interest that just started getting paid a lot, and
Mm,
like kind of got golden handcuffed it into doing a lot of stuff. But I mean, look, I've been oil painting since I was 7. I loved when I first got into advertising. I still do a lot of advertising work, but it's not like my only thing,
mm,
like I
mhm.
do other stuff too.
Yeah.
um and I love creativity, and I love helping people with their branding and all that kind of stuff, but it's not like my only thing. Like when you're an executive in an ad agency, that's all you get time to do. Like there's
Yeah.
no time for anything else.
So, Rahul, let me ask you this and thank you for describing in such detail of just having that. I don't even know if you would call it near death experience because it was a death experience, right?
I call it a
Like
death experience.
near death experience. Yeah. So, having gone through that, what fundamentally changed from that experience, but also just the year or two of recalibrating? Like what was that biggest takeaway you learned from that experience?
I mean, to be honest, I'm still in it.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, it was only 8 years ago. Like think about like when you were 8 years old. Like you're still figuring out how to be a person.
Mm,
I mean, you're on your way. You're not like a toddler
right.
anymore.
Right.
But when it happened, I had a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I was very, very interested in early childhood development, the stages of development, the stages of mind development, the stages of ego development.
Yeah.
And the last 8 years for me was like, on one perspective, I was an observer watching my human self become, but I was like this eternal consciousness watching it happen.
Yeah.
But like literally watching my mind and my body like mature,
Yeah.
like things that used to like make me really upset to where I would like cry or something. Now I can just breathe and be like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
or or speak up for myself or whatever. But yeah, like when I first came back, I was like a baby. I was a child. Like I didn't gracefully quit that job at Pepsi. I mean, I kind of like when we moved to LA on a Monday, I told my wife, "Hey, on Friday the moving truck's coming and we're moving to LA." Like that's not how an adult communicates to a wife. And she
Oh,
was really
wow.
pissed off about that. I mean, I pissed her off in so many ways because she wasn't married to an adult. She was married to like a brand new like baby in like an adult body with like a big bank account.
Yeah.
So I just traveled the world and did whatever I wanted, but I had no I had no ability to consider her in any of it. I was just trying to
Mm,
figure out I was really just trying to figure out what am I doing here?
yeah.
Like a baby is helpless, and that's a good thing because if a baby had an Amex and a passport, um, you know,
Yeah.
you'd have a problem, right?
Right.
So like
Right.
literally I went to Haiti and did a bunch of calls with my recruiters and new job things, and I flew back from Haiti like on a Sunday night, and on Monday I said, "Hey, we're moving to," this my wife had no clue what was going on. I was like completely doing my own thing.
Wow.
So, I mean, also like I don't know how to put it, but like I didn't know how to leave the relationship
Mm,
before the death situation. I still didn't know how to leave the relationship because like she had a I don't know how to put it. There was kind of like a leaky sexual energy with her and some people in her life. So I didn't know how to like say this doesn't work for me.
yeah.
So
So,
I just kind of unplugged from her. Like I
okay. So this is interesting. So let me ask you this. Do you feel before the ayahuasca and the death experience that you went through, before that, were you already sort of like on the fences about your family or did this experience all of a sudden just made you do like a 180? You know what I mean? Because the way you're describing it sounds like as if it was in the back of your mind. This
yeah,
brought it front and center. So it wasn't like it's not something didn't get created that wasn't there. I think it sounded like it was already there. It just didn't know how to resurface.
correct.
Is that
I
is
was
that
already, let's just say, dying inside over a
mm,
lot of these things.
wow.
I already didn't like what I was doing for work. I already didn't like the city I was living in. I already didn't like the relationship I had with my wife. And I really didn't know how to separate from the mother of my children. Like
Mm,
I mean, my parents are still together, so I just
yeah.
I don't get it. Like everything that I did after coming back, I am glad happened. It's just before that happened, I didn't know how, like I'm like ridiculously loyal to where like I'll put myself second. So I didn't know how to get around that. Like I didn't know how to get around my own loyalty.
Mm,
So coming back, it I don't know how to put it, but there was just a reprioritization.
yeah. Well,
And
it was from a clean slate because you had to relearn everything. So it wasn't like you had the old here's the whole set of puzzle pieces, like Tetris pieces, and you have to refigure it out. It's more like, no. You get to make whatever you want now because it was like a hard factory reset, it sounded like.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right.
I mean, like no joke. I mean, the first 5 years back, all my cousins, everybody was like, "Damn, dude, you're super selfish." But
Mm,
if you talk to any kid younger than 5 years old, they're super selfish too, and that's kind of the point of being a kid.
mm,
And like in a lot of spiritual traditions, they say know thyself or something like that. Knowing yourself is a selfish exploration, right?
mm,
Because how else would you know yourself without diving into the self?
right.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's just where I was.
Wow. I can't believe that that's just the first half of our interview with Rahul today. Because of how much we cover in his journey, I felt it was best to create two parts to this interview. I hope you enjoyed this chapter 1 as much as I have. Since this is the first time I'm releasing a two-part interview, I will drop chapter 2 next week on Wednesday, May 31st. If there's one takeaway I can share in this chapter 1, I'll leave you with this quote. Awakening is not changing who you are, but discarding who you are not. This quote was by Deepak Chopra. If you enjoyed today's interview, share this interview with someone who you feel can resonate with Rahul's story. Please subscribe to this Boom Vision podcast if you want to thrive together. Until next time, folks, be kind to yourself. Be in the light. Be you. Thank you so much for tuning in to my Boom Vision podcast. If you'd like to find out more about me and this podcast, head over to benjaminyeh.com. That's spelled BenjaminYeh.com. If you haven't already, click subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.